Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're getting into something really fundamental. What actually drives achievement?
We are, and we're digging into some fascinating sources, especially Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance.
It's a great source, and it tackles this common belief we have, doesn't it?
It really does. You know, when you see someone incredibly successful, the default is often to think, wow, they're so talented, like they were just born that way.
Absolutely. It's the easy explanation, that idea of some kind of innate gift.
But this book and the research it pulls together, it pushes back on that. It suggests, well, talent matters, sure, but maybe something else matters more, especially over the long run.
And that's something else is grit.
That's the term, yeah, grit. And it's defined as this combination of passion and perseverance, but not just fleeting interest. It's about sticking with things, really long-term goals, years, potentially.
So for this deep dive, our goal is really to unpack that. What does the evidence in these sources actually say grit is? How does it compare to talent? And maybe the big question for a lot of us listening, can you actually grow it? Can you develop grit?
And the sources jump right in with something kind of surprising, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it seems that while most of us say we value effort, like if you asked people in polls, they often rank effort highly. Our gut reactions, maybe our unconscious biases, might lean the other way, towards talent.
That is interesting. How did they figure that out, that we have this hidden bias?
There were these studies by Chia-Jong Se. She presented experts, musicians, venture capitalists, people like that, with information about different individuals.
Okay.
And these individuals were described, maybe their performance was outlined, but one was framed as a natural, gifted, and the other was framed as a striver, someone who worked incredibly hard, persevered.
Even if their actual skills or results were basically the same.
Exactly the same, yeah. And despite saying they valued hard work, these experts pretty consistently favored the natural.
Wow.
They rated the natural as more likely to succeed, more hireable. The striver often had to show much more proof of success just to be seen on the same level.
It shows how powerful that idea of effortless achievement is, doesn't it? That preference for the natural.
It seems really deep-seated, and it reminds me of some critiques, of those management philosophies that were all about the war for talent.
Right. Focusing only on talent can make you miss other critical things. You saw that with some big company failures, didn't you? Where they were obsessed with talent, but maybe overlooked perseverance or, well, grit.
Yeah, that talent uber alles mindset. And you might assume, okay, if you're talented, things come easy, so you'll stick with it. But the research, like that big West Point study, paints a different picture.
The West Point study. Tell us about that one. That sounds like a place where perseverance is really put to the test.
Oh, absolutely. They studied thousands of cadets going through Beast Barracks, that incredibly tough summer training. About 1 in 5 drop out.
That's a high attrition rate.
It is. And for years, West Point tried to predict who would make it using their standard measures, academic scores, physical tests, leadership potential. They bundle it into something called the whole candidate score.
Kind of like an overall aptitude score.
Pretty much. But when Duckworth measured the cadets' grit using her scale...
What did she find? How did grit compare to that whole candidate score?
Well, here's the kicker. There was absolutely no correlation between grit and the whole candidate score. None. High aptitude didn't mean high grit. Low aptitude didn't mean low grit. They were totally separate.
So having all that talent or aptitude didn't predict if you'd actually tough it out when things got really hard.
Exactly. Grit was the single most reliable predictor of who finished Beast Barracks, the cadets who quit. Their aptitude scores looked just like the scores of those who stayed. Talent wasn't the differentiator for perseverance in that high-stress situation.
Okay, this feels like it leads directly into one of the most important ideas in the book, I think. The formula for achievement.
Right. The way Duckworth lays it out. Talent times effort equals skill.
So talent is like how fast you get better when you try, your learning rate.
Yep. But then, and this is the crucial part, effort comes back into play.
Skill times effort equals achievement.
Exactly. Effort doesn't just build the skill, it's also what makes the skill you have actually produce something. You could be incredibly skilled, but if you don't put in the effort, you don't achieve anything with it.
So effort counts twice. It builds skill and it makes skill productive. That really shifts things, doesn't it? It's not just about finding what you're naturally good at.
It totally does. It moves the focus towards consistently applying energy, putting in the work. It kind of dismantles that myth of the effortless genius.
Yeah.
And it lines up with what other researchers found, like the sociologist Dan Chambliss studying Olympic swimmers.
Right. He found that top performance wasn't about, like, one magical ability.
No, not at all. He called it a confluence of dozens of small skills or activities. Things learned, drilled into habit, fitted together. Nothing superhuman in isolation.
It was the combination and consistent execution of all the mundane little things.
Precisely. He called it the mundanity of excellence. Excellence is built on mastering and integrating lots of small, often unglamorous details consistently.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like that idea of craftsmen taking pleasure in perfecting the small stuff, like Nietzsche talked about.
Yeah.
Tirelessly combining the means.
So, okay, if grit is this important and it's not the same as talent, how do we get more of it? The sources seem to suggest it's a mix of things you cultivate inside yourself and things in your environment.
Right. Let's start with the inside-out factors. Passion seems key, but maybe not in the way we usually think about it.
Yeah, that whole follow your passion advice can be tricky because for most people, passion isn't just like discovered, fully formed. It often starts small and interest.
Something that catches your attention, maybe?
Exactly, a little spark. And then it needs nurturing. You have to keep engaging with it, digging deeper over time. Like the example of Mike Hopkins getting into space, it wasn't one moment, it was repeated exposure, actively learning more.
So it's less about finding a passion and more about developing one through sustained interaction and effort.
Right, and interestingly, putting effort into something can actually make you care more about it. It goes both ways.
Okay, so fostering interest is one part. What about the perseverance side? That brings us to deliberate practice, doesn't it?
Yes, deliberate practice. And this is crucial. It's not just logging hours. It's not mindless repetition.
It's a targeted effort, right? Aimed squarely at your weaknesses.
Precisely. It's about setting specific, challenging goals for improvement, focusing intently, getting feedback quickly, and then refining based on that feedback. Think Kaizen, continuous improvement.
Like a musician isolating that one difficult bar and playing it over and over, slowly, correctly. Or an athlete working on just one aspect of their technique, not just scrimmage, but focused drills.
And the sources suggest this is hard. It's not necessarily enjoyable in the moment because you're constantly pushing the edge of your abilities. It feels like effort.
Which makes it different from that feeling of flow that Csikszentmihalyi talks about, that effortless immersion.
Exactly. Deliberate practice is often the really demanding work behind the flow state you might experience later in a performance. You know, watching Katie Ledecky swim looks effortless, but she'd tell you it's built on incredibly grueling, focused practice.
Okay, so interest develops into passion, and perseverance is fueled by deliberate practice.
Yeah.
What else is needed internally?
Purpose. This is a big one. The feeling that what you're doing matters beyond just yourself, that it contributes to others, connects to something larger.
So moving beyond just personal enjoyment or gain towards something more meaningful.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Meaningful. Adam Grant's research showed this. When people saw how their work helped others, their persistence shot up.
Like the parable of the bricklayers. Are you just laying bricks or are you building a cathedral?
That's the perfect analogy. Same job, different purpose, totally different experience and motivation. And Amy Wierzniewski's work showed that seeing your work as a calling isn't about the job itself, but how you frame its connection to others or a larger mission.
And like interest, purpose can grow over time too, right? It doesn't have to be there from day one.
Absolutely. It can develop as you go.
Okay, interest, practice, purpose, and the last internal piece.
Hope. But not just wishing, it's more specific. It's the belief that your efforts can actually make a difference, that you can overcome setbacks. It ties back to Seligman's work on learned helplessness.
Right, where animals and people could learn to just give up if they felt they had no control over bad situation.
Exactly. But the flip side was learn optimism. Some subjects never gave up, they stayed resilient. And the difference seemed to be in how they explained bad events to themselves.
Their explanatory style.
Right. Optimists tend to see setbacks as temporary, specific, and controllable. I didn't manage my time well on this task. Pessimists see them as permanent, pervasive, and personal. I always mess up. I'm just not smart enough.
And that internal story makes a huge difference in whether you keep trying.
A massive difference. Teaching people to adopt more optimistic explanations, focusing on effort, strategy, things they can change, actually boosts persistence and performance. You see this in Carol Dweck's mindset research, too.
Believing you can grow versus believing your abilities are fixed. Praising the effort, not just the talent.
Exactly. So hope is really about that underlying belief that you can influence outcomes, that setbacks aren't the end of the story. And actually overcoming challenges, especially through your own effort, builds that hope and resilience.
Okay, so those are the internal factors: interest, practice, purpose, and hope. But grit isn't just internal, is it? The environment plays a role the outside-in influences.
Definitely. Starting right from childhood with parenting and mentorship.
What kind of parenting seems to foster grit?
The research points towards something often called wise parenting. It's this combination of being really supportive and warm, but also demanding. Setting high expectations, but providing support to reach them. Clear boundaries, lots of respect.
A balance, then. Not too authoritarian, not too permissive.
Right. And beyond parents, mentors are huge. People outside the family who guide you, encourage you, maybe see potential you don't see in yourself yet.
Like that story about Toby Lutke, the Shopify founder, who had a mentor help him overcome what he thought were learning difficulties.
Yeah, those relationships can be pivotal. Then there's the impact of activities structured extracurriculars.
Sports, music, debate club, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Studies found these activities were kind of unique. They combine challenge and intrinsic motivation in a way that, say, regular classes or just hanging out with friends often didn't.
And the key thing wasn't just doing an activity, but sticking with it.
Yes, that's what the longitudinal studies showed. It wasn't which activity, but the duration. Kids who stuck with at least one extracurricular for multiple years did better later on higher graduation rates, better jobs, leadership roles.
It's the follow-through that builds the muscle of perseverance.
It really seems to. It signals that commitment. Some places, like Harvard admissions, apparently even try to score this, looking for that sustained multi-year involvement.
The grit grid, I think they called it,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that sticking with something hard for years matters.
And finally, there's the power of culture, the environment of your family, your school, your team, your workplace.
The norms and expectations of the group you're in.
Yeah. If you're in a culture that explicitly values resilience, hard work, learning from failure, think of certain schools like KPP or sports teams like the Seahawks under Pete Carroll, or even companies that culture pushes individuals to develop those traits.
Like Anson Dorrance's demanding culture for his UNC soccer teams. It creates an expectation of toughness and continuous improvement.
Exactly, which ties into this idea called the corresponsive principle.
What's that?
It's the idea that we tend to seek out environments that match our personality traits, but then those very environments reinforce and strengthen those traits.
So it's a feedback loop. Gritty people might seek challenging situations, and those situations make them even grittier.
Precisely. Our environments don't just happen to us, we choose them, and they shape us in return.
Okay, let's try and pull the main threads together from this deep dive. We've dug into Angela Duckworth's grit and related research.
And the core definition that emerges is that grit is this blend of passion and perseverance aimed at really long-term goals.
A huge takeaway is that critical difference between talent and effort. Talent is how fast you learn. Effort builds the skill and makes it productive. Effort counts twice.
Yeah, that's fundamental. And we talked about developing grit from the inside, fostering interest into passion, committing to that tough, deliberate practice, finding a purpose bigger than yourself, and cultivating hope through how you explain setbacks.
And also how grit is shaped from the outside. By supportive but demanding parenting or mentoring, by sticking with challenging activities for the long haul, that multi-year commitment matters, and by the culture of the groups we're part of.
It really shifts the focus away from just relying on being a natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It highlights how much consistent effort and intentional growth matter over time.
We saw that in the examples the West Point study showing grit, trumped aptitude for perseverance, the bias towards naturals even when performance is equal, the power of optimistic thinking, the impact of sticking with activities.
It really encourages you, the listener, to think less about fixed limits and more about your consistency, your approach to practice, your why, and maybe the environments you're choosing.
Yeah, and thinking about how our limits maybe aren't as fixed as we think. And that corresponds to principle you mentioned, how the situations we gravitate towards can actually strengthen the traits that took us there.
It does leave you with a pretty potent question to think about, doesn't it?
It does. What kinds of environments are you seeking out or maybe even creating for yourself right now? And how might those choices be actively shaping your own capacity for grit?